All right, everyone, it's time to talk about critical race theory. The boomer libs have decided to pivot because they've completely lost the engagement on critical race theory itself. They're trying to do a few weaselly things now to defend it while abandoning its name. Like in Virginia, they're now rambling about Toni Morrison. Well, there was a Toni Morrison book and a school board decided to not have it be read because it gave some kid nightmares and stuff, but it's really a tale about slavery and reparations and shit like that. It's like, that has nothing to do with critical race theory. To be clear, you're talking about a fictional account, a book. It's like fucking Harry Potter or anything else that's ever been banned by a school board or by a PTA or whatever. A school has decided to take it off the fucking shelves for being, culturally obscene. Well, we've seen this before. I don't support it, by the way. I don't think that books should ever be singled out to be removed simply because some parent or one student has a problem with it. But that's not talking about critical race theory. The other thing is they're trying to cast it off as basically a conspiracy theory in different words, as a right-wing culture war. Well, it's not a culture war. The left clearly started this by attempting to inject historical revisionism into the school system. And parents, because by and large they don't participate enough in civics, weren't aware that this was happening. But then they grew a mass consciousness. People discovered that there was this hypothetical sort of arena of so-called academic thought that taught that whites should feel guilty, that self-refutes, derives explicitly from Marxism and even proclaims that to be the fact, that's pushed by some of the worst dregs of society, that ignores basic mathematical statistics and everything else, and is essentially a form of soft communism in which you've replaced class struggle theory with race struggle theory. That's all it is. It's very simplistic. You can sum it up in a couple of sentences quite easily. I decide to, for the purposes of refutation, I went a little bit further in my own booklet on the subject. By the way, Debunking Critical Race Theory, still available on Amazon. Almost 3,500 copies have sold of it, so it's doing pretty well. Yes, we are red-pilling some people. And because it's small, and I kept the cost down, get several copies and, give them to your liberal friends as a joke to piss them off. Then they'll become book burners. I'm going to light my fireplace with this. So it's probably a gas fireplace because, burning wood bad, deforestation or whatever. Anyway, it's not a right-wing culture war. There are a significant proportion of liberals don't support critical race theory once they understand what it is. I'm not right-wing, except on certain issues, but I mean, if you look at me on like abortion or gay rights, you'd think that I was a hippie, so it depends on which issues are considered culturally more important at the time that are being debated over. Critical race theory I oppose mainly because it's not academic, it's a pile of trash. The entire supposition is self-refuting and wrong. I already picked through this. I made several videos on the topic. I wrote a fucking booklet on the topic. Critical race theory, there's no reason to have a culture war or a debate over it. It shouldn't be in schools except for the purposes of criticizing it as a minor quasi-academic movement because it's a historical mumbo-jumbo nonsense. It would be like talking about Noah's Ark in fucking public schools that are taxpayer funded. It would be exactly the same. If you want to bring it up in the context of, hey, these are creation myths, or here are ways throughout history people thought the world was created or destroyed, etc., in the sense of comparative religion or the history of like the Bible or something, that's fine. Go ahead and bring it up for the purposes of discussion. Maybe one person believes that Noah's Ark really existed. They're a student, they're not a teacher, they're not taxpayer funded. They can talk about it all they want during this class discussion. Another student can say that actually, no, the world is on the back of a giant turtle. There can't be a world flood because all the water would run off because the turtle's back is curved, and so on forth. But if the teacher decides to be peddling Noah's Ark, that's wrong. That's not real. We know that it's not real. The entire thing makes no fucking sense. Any reasonable person will see that, including at this point, I think a majority of goddamn Christians realize it's a metaphor. It's probably some localized event and some dude took all of his animals on the ship and then he exaggerated later to tell a good story to his neighbors or something. Or based it off Sumerian lore. That's the more likely option. Think of anything under the sun, though, that we can pretty much establish as bullshit and think of it being taught in a school. That's the problem with critical race theory. It's just not real. The idea that you can take a system, by the way, And critical race theory proponents literally claim this. And again, I'm talking about the opinions of the academics behind analyzing and participating in this on the peer-reviewed level. According to these eggheads, which is what they are, according to these people who are very intelligent on paper and know a good grift when they see it, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, the entire legal and social structure of Western civilization was entirely created with the idea of racial domination by white people. That is, it was created by white people specifically for them, and the whole system from the bottom up is just completely corrupted by racism, the racism of white people towards every other group of people, with the exception of those model minority Eastern Asians. That's the one exception that has somehow become built in, despite the fact that they were basically slaves for the first 100 years that they were being brought over to work on rail lines, etc. Anyway, but then the same theory argues that the legal and political system that they've just said was created by whites for whites should be weaponized, should be expanded in order to take care of racial injustice. Now, methinks that this is a self-refuting concept. It's basically like the idea of fighting Sauron using the Ring of Power. It's simply not going to work. I don't want to make a cringy metaphor, but I'll use one that the average person will understand. It just doesn't make any sense. When CRT looks at statistics, it very carefully ignores job statistics, it very carefully ignores income statistics, it very carefully ignores crime statistics, and just peddles the same bullshit. People who are non-white are beaten up on and downtrodden all of the time. Then you look at the actual statistics for income, because again, supposedly the system was built by and for white people. And yet you find that the three most wealthy groups in the United States aren't white. They're people from India, people of Japanese origin, and people of, I think, Korean origin, if I remember correctly. So critical race theory is wrong. It's wrong. All 5 points, four of its 5 main points are wrong. The fifth can't be wrong or right. It's just a statement of its own origins, and it claims Marxism is part of them. That has nothing to do with a culture war. This has to do with having a functioning educational system. We've already got a dysfunctional educational system because of Common Core, because of No Child Left Behind. Get the feds out of it. Let the parents involve themselves at the school board level. They should have been doing that anyway. It was the fact that the parents didn't show up that allowed goofy shit like this to be peddled, and nobody noticed at first. Nobody cared. Now, though, parents are growing a social conscience, and they have largely rejected CRT. That's why Juan Williams comes out and says, well, parents' rights is really a dog whistle for white supremacy. What the fuck are you talking about, dude? I guarantee that there are plenty of black people in historically black high schools right now showing up at the school board meetings for the first time saying, don't teach my kid commie bullshit. This is not about Toni Morrison and trying to whitewash the literature and censor academic discussion, because CRT is not academic. It happens to have been created as a unified hypothetical field by academics, but that's like saying that this dude has a PhD and he thinks that cancer doesn't exist. Oh, well, that's his academic opinion, right? He's got a PhD. Just because a person has a degree in one field or another, and most of this will be like feminist studies or something like that, a black history degree, that doesn't mean that they qualify as historians. Clearly they don't, because they obviously don't understand it, and they certainly don't understand statistical mathematics. So what's the fucking point? It's not a philosophy. It's not a field of teaching. It's not even a theory. We should stop calling it critical race theory and start calling it critical race hypothesis in order to fit more in line with the actual concept of scientific theory. It's not. According to the realm of science, the term theory as it's used in day-to-day parlance is a little bit different. Mostly people mean hypothesis. Well, it's my theory that the sun is actually a flat disk. Well, no, that's your hypothesis. It's not what evidence do you have of this? CRT lacks any. In fact, all of the evidence, virtually, stacks up against it. Well, why should we teach it in schools then? We might as well teach them that the earth is on top of a turtle, or that's being held up by Atlas, and if he ever shrugs or has to scratch his nose, we're in big trouble and there'll be earthquakes and shit like that. It's just as realistic as critical race theory, and someday those mythologies will be classed the same as CRT as well. It has already been defeated, which is why they're trying to go around that defeat. Right now, the leftoids and libs are trying to flank around a front line which is crumbling. So they're trying to withdraw and go around the opposing force because they know that they've lost. So now they're casting as a culture war, well, those evil right-wingers have started this. They want to censor the school systems. No, we're saying that we don't want commie horseshit, which is not historical and not educational, in schools. And you don't need to be right-wing to understand why teaching kids nonsense is a bad idea. Again, that sort of thing, if you want to discuss it in a critical context, that's fine. Teaching it as though it was true, when it's clearly not, and not providing any of the evidentiary arguments against it, that lopsided stupidity denigrates the educational system. By the way, that's a good thing to point out. If you're ever in a debate with a person on the left, simply point out the historical nonsense of critical race theory, so-called, and then ask why you want to teach kids lies in school. Way better than focusing on white people. You know, that argument works with some, but it doesn't work with the libs. Otherwise, they wouldn't be proponents of this. That's about all. Peace out.